Good evening and welcome to Speaker's Corner UK channel. Again, one of these sort of spur of the moment videos with my good friend and co-host from the Gin and Tonic Show, Stop Spamming. Good evening, sir. How are you this evening?
Hi, good evening. I have no idea. I don't know what I'm doing here. I just said, jump on, bloody well, switch on the machine and get here now. Okay, I don't know what I'm doing here. I don't know what's happening. I'm just here.
Good. So that's what definitely what we call spur of the moment. So I guess part of the reason Stops and I have obviously do the Gin and Tonic. I've been a little bit ill, but I'm on the mend now, so that's good. But happened to watch a few videos on Sunday, which I haven't done for a little while. And what we're going to share with you this evening is a video which, if you're following anything that happens in Speaker's Corner or free speech, then you will see what happens with Hatun. She's a Christian missionary that challenges the Muslims in particular on their narrative in Speaker's Corner. And so she was removed from Speaker's Corner, ostensibly, presumably for her own safety. So we're going to go over part of the video. So from Ahsoka Films, got the sort of close video. There's a number of other uh, perspectives on this from Speaker's Corner, which I've watched as well. So we're going to do sort of that part and comment on that. If you're somebody who thinks that freedom of expression or freedom of speech in Speaker's Corner specifically should be limited, or you think that the police action was justified, then let us know in the comments, and we can have you on and we can discuss that. I think Stops and I
Well,
are of the view. Go on, Stops, you speak.
no, I just, there's an alternative because I saw now in Germany there's a guy who is running around criticizing Islam and he's being attacked left, right, and center. He's been punched, stabbed, he's had bottles thrown at him and all sorts of things. So what they're doing now is they put up these I don't know what you call them, palisades, banisters, I don't know what you call them. These are metal frames that you see in concerts and things like that. So they're like 1.5 meters high, so it's quite difficult to jump over them. But you can still access them. But as soon as you stand on them, your weight is actually keeping them down, and they can be hooked together. And what they're doing is they're creating a zone, a safety zone, so that the speaker can get on his impromptu stage, as it were, and then he can go and approach people individually, but he always has this metal thing in between him and the people. So if it gets too dicey, he can always take a step back and he's out of the reach. And that is shown to be very, very effective in separating the people when it comes to dangerous situations like this, so that there's always a little bit of distance between the speaker and the people he's speaking to.
Yeah, maybe you could at some point show us a photo of that, or let us see what that looks like. I've never heard of that, but I was thinking of something like that, and it might be, a case, and I'm sure we'll cover more of it as we talk. It might be the case that they have to set something up there like that in Speaker's Corner and have metal detectors and have people pass through them in order to come into Speaker's Corner on a Sunday or something like that. Now, again, from what I heard on Sunday, this past Sunday, the police are not particularly well informed. But with this, we now have a thing stops over here that from today, you're only allowed to gather in a group of six, no more than six people. And so how that will work for Speaker's Corner is yet to be determined. But one way is to obviously have a meeting, around you, or to have the speakers separate, or to somehow separate crowds. So I'm not quite sure how that would work. But I
Yeah,
do think that something like that might need to be the case, unfortunately, because of the sort of people that are showing up in Speaker's Corner more recently.
and it's getting more and more violent. So, yes, it is a safe space, so to speak, but it's really the way that it's intended, and that it's a physical safe space, not a verbal. So you can still hurl abuse in that, and that's perfectly fine. It's just that there should be no violence, and this is a way of curbing the violence because you're setting up a short, a small, or whatever distance so that you can still hear the people, but you can't directly stab them or something like this. And this, I think, is sort of an
Yeah,
intermediate thing. How to do it? How you separate the six people? Well, I think that's impossible. They're doing you have to wear a mask as soon as you are within the reach of 1.5 meters or something. And they always have cops there, and the cops go and they issue, I think it's $20 or something, if you do not wear a mask if you are within the space of these people. So I think that's the only way that you can do it.
yeah. I mean, different countries, it differs all over the show. I think my view is that the principle of freedom of speech and freedom of expression is one of the most important that we have in this country, and whatever the manpower, whatever is required to protect it should be done. And if that means having 100 police officers down every Sunday from 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. in the evening, then that's something that you would do. What's more important than those sort of freedoms being exercised? And that includes, by the way, and I heard it recently, like the Nation of Islam. So, this, cult type organization demonizes all white people and has Islam to boot. So you have, double, it's racism and Islam together, right? But the perfect storm. They should be allowed to do their thing. And in fact, they do come down there, and this old sort of, I can't remember his name, but this old lunatic just rants and rave, and I support his right. And if other people were down there and wanted to harm him, it would be exactly the same. We could do a video and saying, hey, we disagree with virtually everything comes out of this lunatic's mouth, but we defend his right to do so. And the police should do the same for anybody, whether it was a Muslim lady, the far right, the far left, whatever it is, the BLM, their opposition, whoever it may be. They have that right, at least in Speaker's Corner, if nowhere else in the entire United Kingdom. And so for me, that's what should happen. But as we're going to see during the video, the exact opposite happened. It's the easy way out. And I'm certainly questioning it. And I want to find out from people that are more aware than myself on the legal ramifications of whether the police can remove you when you haven't acted unlawfully, and particularly from Speaker's Corner, again, which is a unique space that isn't the same necessarily as some other spaces. So that will be
the hallowed grounds.
Yeah. And so if you do not want to leave, are you obligated, or do they have the authority to move you on against your will? And as we'll see in the video, it certainly seems that Hatun did not want to leave, and so she was removed. And if they were going to arrest her, they'd obviously have to give her a charge and what that charge is, and then they could have arrested her. So, and maybe that's what she will potentially do in future. So, no, I'm not leaving, and you arrest me in order to get me out of here. I'm not going for my safety, if that's what she wants to do.
Well, the problem you have here now is violence. And this is the problem, because, you can say whatever you want. But if you have now, because like I said to you, when I was watching this on somebody else's video as it was happening, I thought, this is like a Pakistani mob going after somebody that they want to lynch. And this for me is troubling, that the police are unable to protect the people who are not causing the violence, but have to extract the people who are the object, who are the victims, because they can't protect them from the mob. So now we have mob dictatorship in the UK, where you have, if you have sufficient people who are going to go and cause this much shit, then the other person is the one who's being punished for the behavior of the mob. And that is, they need to think of something, because this can't this can't continue, because we've seen it now in Scandinavia. Now we're seeing it in the UK. In Austria now, they've actually prohibited political Islam. You are no longer allowed to propagate any kind of legal, what do you want to call it, laws or behavior or something in the whole of Austria, which is linked to Islam. Those are very interesting experiments.
Are you saying that people cannot espouse Islam, or people can't critique it?
No, what you can do is you can go and practice your religion. In other words, you can go and pray. You can do all those things, but there is no way that you are allowed to do anything in the form of Sharia, anything that has anything to do with the legal ramifications that is going against the Austrian constitution. So the political Islam has been prohibited, forbidden, or ousted, or whatever you want to call it.
Right. I mean, that's also a dangerous precedent, right? But because who says that they've got the perfect model? So I think
it's an experiment.
That's also something. Yeah, it is. But I think, without further ado, I think let's get into the video, and we'll listen to the best of our ability. You'll be able to hear it even better than I. We both got headphones on, so listen closely. So this is part of the video with Soko Films, and this is the part now. This is a long video. I'm on a mobile phone, but maybe Stops can post the link in the chat, so that you can go watch the whole video on Soko Films. There's other perspectives. I think some Muslims also recorded this from different angles. And of course, there were some celebrations, etc. And we're going to go over a little bit of this now. And you're listening, and some of the things you'll hear is quite telling, of course. And we'll stop it along the way. But I think that my position, and I don't stops whether you agree, is that of course Hatun should be free to express her views as long as there's no physical harm to somebody else in speaker's corner, if nowhere else, and that any agitators or anybody that threatens her or anybody else should be removed from the park. That's my view, and whatever resources it takes. I think that is one of the jobs that the police are there to do, and especially here in the symbol of what is supposed to be freedom of speech and freedom of expression in the United Kingdom, whether it's, insulting my mother, the Queen, this old book, or some dead guys from thousands of years ago. Those are all fair game in the sense that they should be allowed. We can talk about what we think of somebody doing X, Y, and Z, but they have the right to do so. Just like I said, obviously, the Nation of Islam can go say their things, the racists, the BLM, you name it, whoever it is, has the right to express themselves there without fear of violent reprisal. That does not mean that you can't critique them strongly, bluntly, loudly, but nothing that would warrant physical violence.
Okay, I've put the link in the chat and I can start. There's going to be a problem because I realized as soon as I opened the video, you started stuttering. In other words, there's going to be a problem as soon as it goes into live. So you will have limited interaction capabilities. So if anybody's in the chat who wants to comment or say something, just put one enter or something. This will catch my eye and then I will stop, okay? Otherwise, I'll just listen out if Rob says something. Now, this is, in the beginning, it's still very dark because this is in the evening in the UK, in London, and there were no lights on at that moment in time. They will come on a little bit later. There is going to be a lot of shouting, so there's going to be a lot of words that you will not be able to understand. It doesn't mean that I can understand it. I will try, I will do my best. If anybody wants to ask, what did he say, what did she say, then just ask and we'll see what we can do. Okay?
In the Torah and in the Gospel. If Muhammad is not there, Quran is false book, Muhammad is false prophet, Allah is false God, Islam is false religion. And the fact is, Muhammad is not there as a prophesied prophet. And all I am asking these people to give up this book and come to the eternal word of God. The one who has holes in his hand, the one who has holes in his feet, and the one who offers you eternal life. He is called Lord Jesus Christ. That he is called Alpha and Omega. He is called Lion of Judah. He is called the perfect word of God. That's Lord Jesus Christ.
Just pause it there a moment. Okay, so you'll hear every now and again, because JC does this a lot. In some ways, it's fun, right? He puts in these sound effects, like people skedaddling, or clapping, or something else that he does that that sort of tells you that he agrees with X, Y, and Z, which can be sometimes amusing. I suppose it can be a bit frustrating if you're on the other side of the fence. I don't know if you've noticed that, but he does put in sound effects every now and again. But now the camera's panning away, so you'll see a group of Muslims approaching now. Now, one of them there that'll come into shot was there earlier on. So if you go watch this video from the beginning, he was very vocal. And he then walked away at one point. And actually, JC, the cameraman who panned around, and you actually see him walking off with his phone. He returns seemingly at the head of or with this big group of Muslims. So we'll see what happens now.
But what I noticed is that they take turns in agitating. So the focus is not on one person. There's a person who will agitate for like 2 minutes, then he will sort of slip away, and the next guy comes in and does it. And they have different people, doing this takbir and things like that. And Allahu Akbar,
Yes.
agitating the crowd. So it's not always the same person. I think they're doing this on purpose so that, the cops can't, focus on one person, remove that person, and then it's peace and quiet. No. They're very clever. Different people doing it. Very, very
Yeah,
well
that's
organized.
a good point. That's a very good point, Stops. They all just shout. If you had to have one of them have a conversation, they wouldn't know what they're talking about, right? They're all clueless, but it's like a baying mob, as you quite rightly point out. So they all just throw some word about, maybe the Trinity or this thing or the Bible or whatever. None of them are going to actually be able to answer any of the critique that's being put to them, and so they will, say it as you say, going around. And Dave is saying in the comments there that there's been a lot of this describing you as a hate preacher. And again, right, this is the whole thing. This is a subjective claim that if you brought any Muslim on here that actually wanted to make that claim and said to him, what do you define as hate, and why should we believe that or take your word for it, or what's there to justify that over, for example, you preaching hate? Right? What's the difference? And I don't think I would be absolutely flabbergasted if there was any Muslim on planet Earth. That's a huge claim. There's supposedly 1.7 billion that could give, something that is even remotely substantive as to why we should accept that term. So to me, this is like Islamophobia. It's just a meaningless term that somebody made up, and they think that if they repeat it endlessly, that somehow it's true or that other people will believe it. And of course, those of us that think a little bit more clearly can just see through the sophistry and recognize these are just words in an attempt to shut down debate and poison the well against people who they don't like. Because you could say exactly the same thing about all the Muslim apologists. They're all hate preachers. They go down there preaching this book that they don't tell you about those parts of the hateful rhetoric. They sidestep that bit. But if they believe the book is true, then they are bringing this book not. In fact, they are even worse. They're dishonest in the sense that they're not telling you about all the hateful verses about non-believers and so forth. So I think, again, that's just one of these vacuous terms that's leveled without any justification.
Hello, everybody in the chat. I see people are trickling in, and I'm sorry if you're a Muslim of Adam Saleh fan. Sorry, it's not going to be about Adam Saleh today. We're not going to insult Adam Saleh. So if you've come here just for that, sorry, it's not going to happen tonight. Very, very sorry. So we're going to just do facts today. One thing I want to point out, what Hatun is doing is, let's call it effective, because number one, she's a woman. Number two, she's got a voice that can cut through steel, so everybody can hear her from a great distance. She's a very loud voice. And number three, what she's throwing out is in what I would call advertising. It's like if you advertise for one washing powder, this is not throwing out hate. This is not hate speech just because you say my washing powder is better than your washing powder. That's not hate, but that is all she's doing. She's just saying, my God has a bigger penis than your God. Mine is better than yours. So what is this? This is just advertising. So she's not saying he's an asshole or something. No, she's just saying that the prophet is fake. My prophet is better than your prophet. My God is better than your God. And that's all she's doing. So, this is just advertising. If you accept advertising, then you need to accept this.
Yeah, and I think if you were a smart Muslim, which there doesn't appear to be too many of those, but if you were, then what you would do is the same sort of thing with the Bible. You would do something to show whether you think the Bible is wrong, or you would bring something along that in that respect. But the other thing you would do is you would not react, because of course what this does, and we'll see a lot of it, it explains or it exemplifies or magnifies what at least some level of the public think about some Muslims. And again, I think we're clear to say that this is not representative of all Muslims, but it certainly shows the undercurrent of at least some subsection, if not the majority, at least some minority version of Muslims, right? So they are just displaying again their lack of psychological and emotional development in the way that they behave. And so this is being highlighted in this way. And again, you'll hear them make these vacuous claims as, well, yes, you can critique, but you can't attack, or this is hate speech. And the question is always the same, which just cuts through all of the sophistry and rhetoric. Who defines what hate speech is, or attack, or critique, and why should we accept your version? So now they need to provide an argument such that it would be convincing to somebody else who's rationally minded, who is interested in a substantive argument. And as soon as you ask those questions, the response is either complete silence or some sort of rambling or babbling that doesn't remotely answer the question. But again, that's not even the supposedly more sophisticated ones can't do it. So the rabble that's running around there shouting and screaming will have no chance, right? Those are not the sort of people you can engage with in any intellectual level.
Yeah, and I just actually missed the chance because I was in a chat, a discussion with a guy who calls himself a sheikh from Durban in South Africa, and he was making funny comments, and then he was actually foolish enough to say, I challenge you to a debate. And I said, okay, I accept. Let's meet up. Let's go next Saturday. Let's do it. Rob UK channel or Neutral or whatever. But then he carried on, and instead of keeping my mouth shut, I answered. And then he realized maybe this was not a good idea to do this. So he bowed out, let's call it that, let's be charitable. And he simply left it. It's unfortunate, but this would have been quite funny because, people are realizing that atheists are the ones who are posing a much bigger problem or a bigger threat to the veracity of Quran and Islam in general. And this is why they're now turning towards atheists, and they don't have any arguments. This is the problem. They cannot do anything. They do not stand a chance. And it's very sad to see the reaction that you get, because they get quite aggressive and quite abusive because they really have nothing else going for them. They can't do anything else. And this is why exactly what Rob says. They should just shut up and say, okay, well, look, we don't have the facts. We just have to leave it on faith, and that is it. We cannot do anything, instead of turning to violence and turning to abuse and turning to things like that. So, yeah.
Yep.
Okay, anybody else?
We respect your religion, and we don't burn holes in the Bible. So you're a different breed of human being.
Okay, I think we need to explain this. He says we don't, drill holes in the Bible. Well, this was a point that she was making, because there are holes in the narrative. There are holes now. This is the evaluation of an Islamic scholar who said there are holes in the standard narrative. We cannot explain them. We don't have anything to answer those questions. And so she, of course, used this, made a hole in the Quran and said, well, the Quran now has some holes in it because it's the hole in the narrative. And this was her way of graphically representing the hole in the narrative, which I think is actually quite funny and quite fitting. It's a very nice meme. But Muslims apparently did not think that this was so funny, even though they are confronted with reality, and that's the way that it is. But this is the reference, just in case somebody missed it.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, if you just stop there, Pavlov is in the chat. Pavlov is one of the more regular visitors there. Hey, Pavlov, shout out. I used to go to Speaker's Corner. I think I stopped going, unfortunately, because I moved over 200 miles away before you started going. So I don't know that we ever got to chat. Maybe we did. I don't remember. We might have done, to be honest. So it's maybe my poor memory, so I apologize. So welcome to it. Yeah, we used to do a lot of that. Every now and again we'll do something spur of the moment. We're always doing gin and tonic on a Friday at 8 p.m. UK time, where we critique Islam for 2 hours, and we invite people on. By the way, we're happy to have any Muslim on, and even fellow critics of Islam, whether they're Christian or somebody else. So that's the focus certainly for the Friday. But for this one here, I think the other point here, Stops, is that the Christians don't believe that the Quran is in any way truthful or reliable or comes from God. So for them, it's nothing, right? The Muslims have to accept some part of the Bible. So it's something that's called, in my view, it's a wonderful word that I heard from one of the philosophical professors in South Africa. Actually, it's called asymmetry. Asymmetry means that it's not even. It's not symmetrical in the sense that Christians don't think that the Quran is a God book, whereas the Muslims think that at least some part of the Bible is. So when they're saying, "Oh, we don't burn the Bible," that's because they are forced to accept some level of the Bible and then sort of claim that some parts of it are corrupted, etc. So whereas the Christians don't have to do that. So she could do that. So that's not really an argument, but it is an asymmetry in the world views. And so for him to level that critique is just vacuous, because the Christian would just respond, well, I don't think that this book is in any way something to do with God, and therefore the fact that you don't burn the Quran, the Bible, that's only because you have to accept part of the Bible. I don't have to accept any part of the Quran.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Thanks, Dave. There's the link for the JNT. This is one of the guys who's doing this all the time. He's the one who's whistling, shouting, screaming, jumping, and you will see him do this for a while, and then he will slip away. And this is the kind of behavior that you see from so many videos of Muslim majority countries. This is how they gather a mob, and then they act on this. And you have these people agitating the crowds, and then they act on this. This is so terrible.
Hatun, answer the question. What's the shame of who? Shame of you.
I think that guy there, as you say, I think he was the main agitator earlier on. So he was the guy that sort of left early on. You're quite right. It's kind of that mob rule. Like, everybody shout from different things here because we don't have much to say. We're choosing to feel offended. We don't even realize that we don't have a high level of psychological or emotional development. That's because everybody else around us has this low level. And so, when there's that sort of crowd, you think, oh, well, this is normal. You don't realize, of course, that you're at a much lower level until you encounter people that have a different view on it and can argue for it. And I've done that, I think, quite successfully for a few years. And whenever I've spoken to Muslims or anybody else that thinks that, A, you don't choose to feel offended, or B, that there's some level in which this is justified, I think that's easy to show that that's not the case. And so, and this sort of individual and many of these others fall into that view, mostly because they can't deal with this thing. And so even, Mansour and all the other guys can't deal with this. They're even now forced to say, well, yes, okay, there are variations. If you look back about 2-3 years when J. Smith first did this, they were adamant there was no variations, nothing. This just wasn't the case.
I remember that. Yes.
And now they're forced to say, well, okay, there's some words that are slightly different, but they really mean exactly the same thing. So even if they're spelled differently or whatever the case is, and of course that doesn't work either. So now, as you say, slowly this is, unfurling itself. And this sort of
because now they're saying, oh, well, maybe there's 700, Yeah, but exactly. It was 0, all right? So which is it?
Yes, yeah.
Poor babies. Anyway, all they can do, what you can see is this is speaker's corner. This is not noise-making corner. This is not whistling corner. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. They're trying to drown out any kind of argumentation, any kind of speech. They only want to go there and make a noise, and that's it.
1 second, the question is, how many children calm
Imagine, I'm just thinking, what would happen if she, at this moment in time, if she would have taken out a lighter and burnt the Quran, she would be dead. There is no way that you can hold these people.
I mean, that may well have been the case, and who knows whether she'll get to that. She's just got to check that it's lawful to do. I hope it is lawful to do. It's not something I personally would do, but I certainly wouldn't condemn her for burning her own book, and it could be whatever the book is, but in this case, it's that particular book. And if you burnt the Christian Bible, now I'm not sure about the Hindus, right? As we've seen recently, Navabi posted a picture of the Hindu goddess, and some of them went lunatic. But we don't have a lot of interaction with Hindus, so we're not entirely sure. But most of the other religions wouldn't go crazy. So it's one religion. And the other thing about this, I was just watching that, right? A couple of things here. One, they're, of course, exposing themselves, which we've talked about. But the other thing is that we're teaching. It's like a child, right? When you teach a child something, you've got to do it many, many times before it gets the message. And I think, certainly for me, the message is clear, that you Muslims will get the message that here in this country, we have, at least as far as humanly possible, freedom of speech and freedom of expression, as long as it doesn't violate somebody's physically. And so you guys will get the message one way or the other. And again, we had Tan, we've got Hatun, whether we agree with every action they perform or not. I think the other thing that, and of course Muslims would never recognize this, and I've said this, right? I said this at Speaker's Corner. If you go look at my channel, there was one video where I had this Abdul Hamid guy, is that sort of big Iranian that became a Sunni, sort of one of those thuggish looking guys who accused me of editing a video to make him look bad. Which of course wasn't the case. I split the video up and only put the part where he had this interaction with Sarah afterwards. I put two separate parts. There was this dialogue, like a debate, and then there was this whole thing afterwards. And so I said to him, Tan is, and I said this, right, and this is like, you can see when you're speaking to somebody and it's like, it's a nuclear bomb that goes off in their brain. They just don't know what to do, right? And so I said to him, Tan is your greatest, what's the word? Your greatest teacher in a sense.
Blessing.
Yeah, because he's teaching you how to upgrade your psychology, right?
Exactly.
Because you are so used to people doing what you want, and you haven't yet learned to control your emotions. What's happening is he's pushing your buttons, or in this case, Hatun is pushing your buttons, and you are allowing. In other words, what's actually happening here that these people are completely blissfully unaware of is that they are under Hatun's control. She is controlling them with like an invisible line, pushing their buttons, and they are reacting like, essentially like Pavlov's dogs. Pavlov's dogs being these little dogs that the scientist got, that he would feed them and ring the bell. He'd feed them and ring the bell, and eventually he could ring the bell, and that the mouth would start to salivate in expectation of food, and he didn't have to bring the food. And so he programmed these dogs that whenever they heard this, they would start to, their mouth would salivate. And in a sense, she's kind of doing the same thing. She's programming them or letting them know that, hey, this is what's happening. And I think the ultimate message for me is you guys have got to join us in the 21st century. You're going to hear things you do not like that you can choose to feel offended by. I can choose to feel offended by all kinds of things I don't, because I want to be in control of that sort of stuff. So nobody can offend me. The only thing can happen is I can choose to feel offended. But they don't realize this. So actually, this is a lesson for them, and I do think that it needs to continue. And I think the bigger thing is that the quote establishment and the government and the police need to recognize this. Now, if I were to debate a policeman or an MP or whatever it is, I could get this message across, and I don't think they'd have any sort of substantive response to it. But unfortunately, we have to do it on here instead. So, but if you think that I'm wrong, or you think that that's not the case, by all means, come on and challenge me on it. I've been challenged many times on this. So there we go.
Sorry, not me, not today, no. The Hindu scriptures that says they should act like that. I think I agree with you, because what we're seeing is that Muslims are getting away with bloody murder, all right? They're getting away with behavior that 20 years ago would not have been tolerated. And this is what other groups see. This is when they're saying, well, okay, look, if the Muslims are getting away with it, then so should we. And this is the evolution, what I call the society, evolution of society, that we are going into a level where violent behavior becomes acceptable if it is in the name of a god. And this is why Hindus are now reacting the same way. And they're saying, look, you're not allowed to insult. They also don't understand the concept. Insult our gods. And they are starting now to get this idea, well, we should protect our gods because our gods are so weak, we need to do it for them. Same principle. And I agree that the behavior of the Muslims over the last 20 years is now becoming normative. That other people are saying, well, then, so we're going to do the same thing. So,
yeah, there's a question there about did Hatun burn the Quran? As far as I know, it wasn't pre-burnt or burnt. She came to the park with the Quran that had holes drilled in it as a metaphor for the holes in the Quran. In other words, for the stories that don't line up. That the claims were that this is inerrant. There was only one book, etc., and that doesn't appear to be the case. In other words, there's holes in the justification for that original extraordinary claim. And so this book is just a metaphor with holes in it to represent that claim.
But not even in this book. Because the one she was holding up now was complete, intact.
No.
Says, I want to go and slap the guy.
Oh, you can't see it now. Can you see the big guy there in the middle? The guy just to the left of him. His face is now turned away. He was one of the agitators. Did some pushing. If you went back a little bit, you might see it. But that Muslim fellow, not quite. I don't know if it was quite there. Okay, just wait a moment. You can see that guy there looking. That fellow, the black guy on the right, he's a Christian, Captain Bloodfire or something. I think his name is. I don't know who the other guy is, but that Muslim that's facing up to him, he's one of the agitators.
it's probably time to say the prayer.
What are you gonna do?
Stop there.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, bro?
Can you control the Muslims, please? Can you control the Muslims, please?
Stop there, stops. Can you hear me? Stops. I think he did. Did I hear it correctly? He came in and said something about let's take a break or words to that effect. I'm sure when I listened to it, that was kind of the first words that the policeman said.
Oh, interesting. I didn't. Okay, I wasn't paying attention.
See
Let me
if you
just
can
go
hear
back a
what-
couple of seconds.
Yeah.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, bro? What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do, bro?
Can you control the Muslims, please? Can you control the Muslims, please?
Okay, so what she says there is,
No.
she says, can you control the Muslims there? But a little bit earlier, as he was coming in, I think he said something like, it's time to take a break now, words to that effect. I thought that's what I heard on my other earphones, so I'm not listening as closely as I could have. But she just said there, can you control the Muslims, please?
Yeah.
Take her out. Can we come out? Can we have a break, please?
There we go. Sorry,
Definitely.
there we go. Can we have a break?
Take her
please?
out. Let's take a break.
Okay, so the question now is, if we stop it there for a moment, the question now is why do we need to take a break? What is it that she's doing that she needs to take a break? What they should be doing is saying, you agitators, step back. You need to take a break. You need to calm down, go and have a meal, go and pray, do something to calm yourselves down, and you take a break. That's what should be
Correct.
happening, but instead,
Yeah.
the attention is
I
put to
agree with
her.
you. They should be the barrier. They should say, okay, let's go to the fence. We stand around you, and nobody's allowed to come closer than 2 meters, and that's it. They should have like a perimeter, but they're not doing that. Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, interestingly enough, in one of the other videos I saw, it wasn't this one, one of the Muslim guys was walking around and he asked the police, right, what happened later on after this? They cleared Speaker's Corner. And you know what the excuse was? There was more than 30 people that breached the COVID guidelines, and they cleared Speaker's Corner. So what happened was, this Speaker's Corner is between two fences. What happened is they moved closer to Marble Arch, which is the main sort of thoroughfare road and underground train station, which is a little bit further up. As you look at that picture there, it's off to your right. So behind the people, for everybody looking to the right, if you walk to the right there where that officer is facing, you'd get to the sort of area that people then congregated. So they closed off this area after this when it got dark, because there was more than 30 people.
And there's in the comment zone, he says they have to assess the situation. Sure, they have to assess the situation, but is this really the best possible solution to take out the one who is being attacked? No. Like I said, they could very well secure her. They had enough people there. They had like 10, 20 people there. They could have just formed a perimeter and said, listen, you can say whatever you want to, and nobody gets to you. That would have been, in my eyes at least, a better solution. Instead of taking her out and removing the person who is the cause for other people getting agitated, they should be able to control themselves. It is free speech. It is Speaker's Corner. You should be able to rile up the masses without being attacked physically. That's the whole point of Speaker's Corner.
But here's the other thing, Stops. If she had carried on there, because at the moment she hasn't done much apart from hold up the corn with the holes in, right? She hasn't even threatened to burn it or anything. At least I haven't heard that. But the corollary of this is that if there was no Muslims around, or they'd come around, walked over and had a smile, or heckled, whatever the case is, and moved on, none of this would have been necessary. The only reason the police are there is because there's some agitation from outside. If that agitation was non-existent or was peaceful and moved on, and she was doing exactly the same thing, there'd be no police necessary. So it isn't just her, it's the fact that there's a reaction to her, which is why the police are there. But that reaction is a choice, and that reaction can and should change. And that's what I think is the goal, is to educate Muslims that no, this sort of behavior, you guys will learn that this is going to happen, that your Quran is going to be burned or it's going to be holes in, and you can choose to take offense or not, or you can join us in the 21st century or find a country that's still back in the 7th century, and you're welcome to go back there. But you guys will get the message one way or the other. And that's the message that I think needs to be portrayed time and again.
But it's true, it's the path of least resistance, and it's the easiest way out. Because now to face a horde of foaming Muslims is a lot more difficult than looking after Hatun, So that's, I think, another aspect that I hadn't even considered, that it's from a personal laziness point of view, it's definitely easier to do that. Oh, you can do that. You can access the links from the phone.
And so this is TDS, Dave, and he was saying under the law, the police should not interfere with people acting lawfully. See the court case. Well, that's what I was interested in, whether there was a court case. You and I picked this up today, so we haven't had a chance to research that. But that was my question: is it lawful to remove somebody who is acting is it lawful to remove somebody who is acting lawfully in a situation where people are quote unquote choosing to feel offended or whatever the case? Because nothing here stops in this country, at least, is that they've got this vacuous law of creating a disturbance. The particular wording, I've just got to think of, because I do watch some of the videos where guys go and speak to the police and stuff like that, and the police try to use this again unlawfully. But there's something, it's a section 5, I think it is, but it's along the lines of creating a disturbance. I'm sure Dave will give me the correct wording for it. And
Dave, if you can, just look up protective custody and see if this would be applicable here.
But okay, so at the moment, then let's take a break, or worse to that effect he just said there, right? In other words, let's calm the situation down. Let's move you somewhere so the crowd calms down, instead of moving the crowd away and telling them to calm down. She's entirely calm in the midst of all of this, right?
Disturbing the peace. What BNS is saying, this is exactly the point of Speaker's Corner. It's supposed to disturb the peace. This is the intention of Speaker's Corner, so that you can go and say whatever you want against the government, for the government, to voice your opinion about any kind of social or whatever grievances without being held responsible for whatever you're saying. This is the whole point of this area. And
I think that's the main thing, Stops, right? Even if we were to have discussions about other public areas around the UK, at least in this particular one place in the entire United Kingdom, she should be allowed to do that. The Muslims can come and burn a book that I think is makes the Quran look silly, something like The Big Picture by Sean Carroll. You learn more from that one book than you would ever learn from the Quran and all the scholars in your entire life. So if you wanted a book that would teach you something about reality, Sean Carroll's The Big Picture. Now, if somebody wanted to burn that book, I'm not going to feel one way or another about it. But that's the other thing, right? They have been brainwashed. They have been told or inculcated with this belief that this book is somehow holy, and that these copies, which are actually, and again, depending on which scholar or Muslim apologist you speak to, they aren't even accurate representations of the original Quran anyway, that these books are somehow holy. In other words, a book that somebody else owns that talks about your faith is somehow holy to you, and you choosing to have an emotional. If you sit and break this down and you start to think about it, it is barely coherent. But this is the thing that that people are kind of accepting as if this is the norm. It's barely coherent.
But the other point is that Muslims are always constantly saying, well, we have only one God. We do not worship anything else but this one God. But I'm sorry, you are showing the opposite. You are showing that you're worshipping Muhammad, because as soon as we say anything about Muhammad, you flip. And as soon as we do anything with the Quran, same story. So you cannot tell me that you do not have the Trinity. This is the same story. You are more sensitive to, to being, anything said against Quran or Muhammad than even God himself. So protective custody is something else. Okay, this was just an idea that I was checking in earlier. Maybe it made sense. If not, well, no. Okay, thank you for that. Brilliant. Oh, shit, it's so nice to have the elves working in the background. I don't know, it's a pity that QI doesn't exist anymore. But...
Angels or the versions of, or just the...
Yeah, but did you watch QI?
No, I didn't. No.
With Stephen Fry, because he always said, we have the elves working in the background when they had any kind of knowledge questions and things like that. The elves went and found out, so I thought this was cute.
Yeah, I suppose if you have like the Legolas version of the elves, I was thinking of these little elves, which I thought was maybe a bit derogatory. It's almost like Santa's little elves, which is probably derogatory, but if you think of the elves as being like a Legolas equivalent or something like that, then of course they are.
Exactly. This is Stephen Fry we're talking about, okay, so yeah.
Right, let's see where we go.
Where's my bag? My bag was on the floor. Let's go out. Let's just get some air, yeah? Bro, this guy just pushed me for no reason. You're going to talk to him? Are you going to talk to him, though? He just pushed me for no reason.
And did you hear what the guy said now? He said, listen, are you going to talk to the guy? He's pushing for no reason. Are you going to talk to the guy? No, they're not. Because he turns around and sees he's confronted by all these people and he gives up. And he decides it's easier to take Hatun out than all these people here to get them under control. And unfortunately, that is the case. But then you need to be prepared for this. You can't go there with one guy and say, okay, I'm going to control 500. You can't do that. So I don't understand why they didn't come prepared for anything like this, since it is escalating. The violence in Speaker's Corner is escalating because Muslims don't know how to behave themselves and can't handle criticism. So, yeah.
I am picking up my things. Control yourself.
Bro, I didn't do nothing to the guy and he just pushed me for no reason. What the fuck is wrong with you people? What? Oh, move yourself. Move yourself. Move yourself. Take the fucking shit. Move yourself. Move yourself. Move yourself. Move yourself. Move yourself.
Okay, they're hopelessly outnumbered. They are hopelessly outnumbered. They can't do anything here. So I don't know if I wouldn't have panicked in a situation like this as well. If I would have been confronted with this pushing, shoving, and this very aggressive stance that you can see, I think the human factor plays a role in here as well.
I think the other thing is you've got to decide what your goal is. And if you're somebody who seems to be, relatively brave like Hatun, if the goal is that ultimately if you have to be a martyr, so be it, that takes some of that away. Obviously, you don't want to be harmed, but I think if you're going to go and do it in this way, then you've got to have some sort of mindset of doing that. Because if, as you say, you go in there timidly, then it's never going to stand. You're never going to achieve the goal. So I guess it depends on what sort of goal you're going for. But I think she could have asked at this stage, and I would have asked, because the moment I saw this, I was playing in my head, what would I have done? If they say, and we'll see what happens, are you arresting me? No, then I'm not prepared to go. Now, she uses similar words that are going to come up. She doesn't ask if she's being arrested, but she does ask other words. But I think, if you're not under arrest and you're not suspected of committing a crime, then them actually touching her is battery. So she could actually sue the police. And, if she does come on the show, if we do speak to her, I'd recommend there is a particular guy that I'll recommend that she get in contact with, because she should sue the police for that. If she wants to, if she wants to be protected and removed, that's fine. But if she doesn't and she hasn't committed the crime, then they, as far as I can tell, they don't have a legal right to remove her. And what they should have done, and sometimes, and you'll see it, right, when extra police come along, form a barrier and push them away, and you shout loudly. Because the other thing you do is you push strongly against the crowd, and you shout very loudly. And that does have an effect depending on the crowd and how riled up they are. But it has a psychological effect, especially if you're in uniform. And I've seen that work quite a lot. And the UK police do that a lot, where they shout loudly, "Get back!" They form a cordon and they push people back, right? And
the form of intimidation.
Yeah.
Determining authority. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Putting holes in the Quran, attempting to burn the Quran is not criticism. It bloody well is. That's exactly the point. That is what you're doing. Number one, you're putting holes in the Quran, which is a meme, which is a metaphorical symbol. It's something that you need to do if there are holes in the narrative. This is the whole point. And burning the Quran is a form of protest. Absolutely.
Okay, so
can
for
you
that
say
guy,
it's not a form of criticism?
But again, we just asked this guy, what is the difference between criticism and not criticism, and why should we accept your narrative? Now put forward a substantial argument. And by the way, you're welcome to come on the show here if you want to put your version and say why it's not criticism and justify it. Because if you're just going to make a vacuous claim, obviously that's not going to be something that we're going to take seriously. But if you can give, this is the reasons why, and here's what I think is criticism, here's what is not criticism, and here's the reasons why, and I think you should accept this too. Now you've got something that we can talk about. Otherwise, it's just your opinion, and you're entitled to your opinion, but we don't take that seriously without a justification.
And we're not talking about absolute freedom of speech. We're just talking about normal freedom of speech. And I don't think there should be restrictions. Because you need to... Okay, it doesn't matter. All right, let's carry on here. See what happens.
Hey, really? 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 I'm one. Okay, go to the side, guys. We want to just take these people away.
Did you say we want to take these people away?
Yeah, I don't know whether he's referring to Hatun or whether he's referring to other people, but I'm presuming it's Hatun because that's the only person that they took away, right? They didn't take her Christian sort of bodyguards with him, so it was only her. So, yeah, I don't know who else he's speaking about.
Look at me!
Stop it there for a moment. I don't know if you heard that. It sounded like there was a policeman shouting in the background, "Look at me, move on."
Yes.
Now that's what they should all have been doing, right? The other thing here that I noticed, obviously it's getting low light as well, and I think that's an extra potential danger, right? Where somebody thinks they can sneak in unseen. You know, if it's middle of the day or it's bright sunshine, or indeed if they had spotlights there, that can also potentially limit or, you know, give a person a second thought if they were going to do something violent or physical. But as the light goes down, of course, and you have a group you can't see necessarily, and that adds an extra level of danger from a physical point of view.
Brother, just a moment. I'm not moving away because it is a problem.
You need to go. You're a hate speaker.
I am not going anywhere.
There we go.
Did you
We
make
heard
out
that
who
one.
said you need to go?
Yeah, that was one of the
Was
Muslims
this a
here.
Muslim?
Yeah, he said you're a hate preacher. Right.
I'm not going anywhere.
This is the narrative that they're doing, right? They've all heard this a few times. So, you know, parrots hear it, parrots repeat it. And so it's just, you know, and if you said to them, why she's a hate preacher and what justification have you got for saying that? Right? This guy would just babble like a child, if anything, or just be completely silent. But when you ask them, or you ask, you know, because Adnan Rashid is obviously pretty famous for saying everybody's a hate preacher, right? But you can't get anything, of course, and he's very good at shouting like anything else. But again, getting a coherent and substantial argument is just non-existent. And but that's not what they rely on, is it? So there's no reliance on justifying their claims, actually having an intellectual discussion. It's more a case of, I'll have my subjective opinion, and it just is the case because I think so. Well, obviously nobody else that's paying attention is going to accept that.
Who are you to say? Are you that sticky bitch? Who are you to say? Boys, watch, he's a cage fighter. Who are you to say? He's a cage fighter. Your Quran is the biggest hate preacher.
What are you going to do?
Okay, so
Your Quran is the biggest hate preacher.
yeah, so there's that Indian guy, you can see him there, he's got the grey hair. He
Yeah.
comes every Sunday and he challenges the Muslims and sort of shouts a little bit. He
That's
basically
what,
said,
that's what I heard.
you know, your Quran is a hate preacher. So, you know, and if they're going to use the word hate, then they've got to, you know, not be hypocrites and have a double standard. And in fact, there is, of course, quite a bit of hate, as you and I have found in the Quran over the years. So by that standard, the Quran should never be used in speaker's corner. If she's a hate preacher, well, then the book that these Muslims preach out of is indeed a hateful book, and that should never be shown in speaker's corner. And you should metaphorically, you know, put handcuffs on the book and take it to the car and drive it off down to the police station.
If you really believe in freedom of speech, say nigger around black people and see the type of reaction that you get. This is the whole point, you idiot. You should not get a reaction. There should not be words that trigger any kind of violent reaction. Are you not capable of mentally...
Stop there for a moment. I get this a lot, right? This is obviously a low level of thinking, right? The idea is, hey, there's going to be consequences for your actions. But okay, that's fine. But then the same thing would apply to you or anybody else. Anything that anybody else deems to be offensive, you should expect to get punched on the nose or whatever else. And all that leads to is absurdity and anarchy, right? So that, from a rational or even moral point of view, simply doesn't work. But to explain that to simpletons is very, very difficult, right? They just think because that's the way they've grown up. If you say something that offends me or my mom or my family, well, the only way, or the quote unquote the way to deal with it is to punch people or get violent. Because hey, if you don't do that, then you're not much of a man. But that's of course that's what sort of. That's a caveman mentality, right? That's
Exactly.
how people used to behave. We've moved on from that. And like I say, all that's happening is your buttons are being pushed, and the only reaction you have is like an animal. You've got to respond with violence. But as you evolve your psychology and your emotionality, you recognize that in fact there are other options. And what's happening is somebody else is pushing your buttons. You are being controlled by somebody else. And the question is, how long are you going to choose to be controlled? You can do it the rest of your life, or you can stop tomorrow, or even sooner than that.
Language. That is beautiful language. That is beautiful language. Beautiful language. Beautiful language. Allahu al-Askar. Allahu al-Askar.
What is she saying? Allahu Akbar?
I don't know what that is. I don't know. Yeah, I heard that.
Okay, I heard a policeman say time out. I think he's
trying to
telling
listen to
her
you.
to keep quiet because she's still stoking it. I mean, that woman is amazing. Personally, I think she's a fool and she's deluded and everything, but she has balls, let me tell you.
I don't feel safe right now. I don't feel safe. I don't want to live right now, sir.
Okay, stop there, stop there.
Come with me.
Okay, so she's saying, I don't feel safe, but I don't want to leave right now. And you'll hear her say shortly, because of my, Christian brother. So I think, she's got to be a bit careful with the words she used, because, if this were to go to court, then the police could say, well, she said, I didn't hear the other thing she said. She said I wasn't safe and I'm going to remove her. So she's got to be a bit more careful with the words there. But you'll hear clearly that she wasn't saying she wasn't feeling safe for herself, but you'll hear that in a moment.
Yeah.
I don't feel safe for my brothers. I don't feel safe for my brothers. I don't feel safe for my brothers.
She says, I don't feel safe for my brothers.
Yep,
This is the
there
funny
she's
thing.
clarified it. Yep, there she's clarified it.
Shaitan has become
Okay, stop there a moment. You missed it there. It's okay. The policeman sort of looks at her. There's
I
nothing
can
to
go
say
back
after that.
to 49:39. I'll go back 5 seconds. This one.
Just watch the policeman's face there, just to the right. The policeman with the cap that's looking towards her now. So you've got the bearded guy here on the right, then you've got the policeman. Now watch when she speaks to him, if you still got that there.
Shaitan has become a
Okay, so it's already happened, right? He stands there like speechless, and he looks around for like guidance. What should I do now? Because she was saying, I don't feel safe for my brothers.
the uncertainty, yeah. Okay,
Yeah,
let's
what
do
do I
this
do
again.
now? Yeah.
I don't feel safe for my brothers. I don't feel safe for my brothers.
Yeah. This look of incredulity. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what do I do now? Now I'm going to look around.
Yeah.
What should I do?
Do we
Isn't
have enough
anything
people
lawful
here?
that I can do? She doesn't want to leave. The situation is becoming potentially more volatile from his point of view. But what do I do now? Okay, let's see what
It's out
happens.
of control, yeah.
Shaitan has become a Muslim. Shaitan has become a Muslim.
You come with me.
So
I don't feel safe for my
Did he
brothers.
say,
I
will you
cannot
come
leave
with
them.
me? I thought
Will
I
you
heard him
come
say,
with me?
will you come with me?
Yes.
And she says, I don't feel safe for my Christian brothers, or some words to that
Yes.
effect. Yeah.
I cannot leave them here. These Christians, I don't feel safe for them. I cannot leave them. Take Muslims out. Take Muslims out. I don't, sir.
Okay, stop again.
Sir.
She said there, I don't know if you heard it, take the Muslims out. She
Yes.
said that a little bit back. Take the Muslims out,
Yes.
which is, that would be the correct thing. That would be the lawful thing to do. If there is quote unquote agitation and disturbing the peace, they are the only people who are not peaceful.
Correct.
And so the
Correct.
unpeaceful people are the people that need to be dealt with, not the peaceful people. And if it's quote the peaceful people that are quote making people unpeaceful, then of course that narrative is easy to expose and to unwind and show that it's fallacious. But then you're down the slippery slope, or as I call it, the black hole fallacy. Slippery slope just sounds too nice. It's a black hole fallacy of anybody then who becomes unpeaceful. You're then going to go and they say, well, that person made me unpeaceful. Then obviously, by that standard, you have to go and get rid of the person who's making you quote unquote unpeaceful, and that becomes absurd.
Now the other thing, because I saw in another video, all of a sudden there were a lot more policemen around. So I think what somebody is doing in the background is he's saying, listen, we need backup, we need backup. So maybe he was looking around to see if that backup had arrived already, if they could control the mob, or if they could somehow extract the person safely, or what they could do to put them in between the two parties, because this is the only problem, that you have two parties which are too close together. So maybe this is also a reason why he was looking.
It's easy for an armchair, for us as armchair people looking good. But I think what I would have done if I were there is try and get her to the fence, and then have whatever police are around, along with her, Christian guys, to stand there as a barrier,
as a buffer,
as a buffer to keep these people away, and to be quite strongly worded to any of these people who are quote unquote being
that was my line of thinking too. Yeah,
because you can't encircle her entirely, but if you can put her against the fence there, because the other side of the fence, they'd have to hop over the fence. You aren't allowed on the other side of the fences, especially the one that's closer to the behind the person's shoulder there, and then you only have to cover like 180 degrees rather than 360 degrees. Right,
so you halve the problem. Yeah.
I don't feel safe for
Keep it here.
They are pulling me. No, they know you're pushing back.
Sir, watch your language. Watch your language.
You're a hate preacher.
Watch your language.
You're a hate preacher.
I am. Yes, I am.
Hate preacher. You should
I'm not going. Well done. Well done.
hate preacher. Right. Miss, I want you to leave the park now.
Sir,
Okay, now he issued an order. I want you to leave the park now.
Yeah,
so
that's not a
that is
lawful
now
order,
a very clear order.
Well, it's not a lawful order. It's his
it's
his
clear.
opinion
No, it's
or his
a-
request.
Correct.
But in order for that to be a lawful order, he'd have to tell you what the reason for that is, and under what jurisdiction, or at least give you some idea of what it is that you are breaching in order for that to happen. So, you can't come up to a member of the public and say, hey, I'm ordering you, or I'm telling you to do X or Y. You'd have to say, hey, I suspect you of doing X and Y, and under the guise of Section 5, I want to. You need to disperse, or whatever the case may be. But I don't think that would be the correct way of using it.
This is not a standard training situation. I don't think they're trained for something like this, because this is exceptional. This is simply too much. I mean, you're getting so much information. People are screaming all sorts of things at you. And then you have the one person that you're actually trying to protect who's saying, no, I don't actually want to do anything. So I don't know how I would react, really. I don't know. Would I have the presence of mind to do something rational and say, okay, let's halve the problem, or do this, separate the people? I don't know what is going on in their heads, how their training manual now provides for any kind of a suggestion what they can do in a situation like that, because they've run out of checklists at this stage.
Yeah, I would imagine that it's de-escalation, and de-escalation by any means necessary, even if it's unlawful against one particular person. Rather have that and the risk of being sued or whatever than having to deal with a mob. And so that's probably, but the whole thing they would tell you in the manual that's de-escalation, or at least that's what the US claims, and I would imagine that the UK is very similar. But the tactics for de-escalation, and as you say, specifically in a situation like this, is let's do we're outmanned here, so let's potentially violate her rights, and we'll deal with the consequences afterwards. Most people don't complain, or they won't sue us or put in a complaint or whatever the case is, and at least after that the situation has been de-escalated. I think that's a long way to go, but I think that's probably how that would work.
Okay, but for me, I would think, if I don't do something now, if I don't do the right thing, tomorrow the newspapers are going to come to me and say, okay, this woman is dead. Why didn't you do something? Wouldn't it have been easier
then you could
just
say
to
that she
take
didn't
her
want
out?
to go. But then you would say, hey.
I know. But the thing is that if the newspapers get to you, they would have said, "Listen, wouldn't it have been easier to take her out instead of letting the mob get to her?" So
Yeah, but then your response will
there's
be,
a lot of
you know, we don't
human
do what's
things here.
easy, we do what's right and moral and
Yeah,
lawful, right? We don't always do what's easy. Doing what's easy, yeah, it was easy to allow, you know, Hitler and the Nazis to, you know, do what they did,
to
but you do
violate
what's right.
everybody else. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't feel safe for my Christian brothers. I don't feel safe for my Christians. I don't feel safe. I don't feel safe for I don't feel safe for my Christian brothers right now. It's not about me. I don't feel safe.
It's not
I'm
about
going to
me.
make you safe because you can't stay here.
Yeah. And she
And again,
says,
okay,
yeah.
and this is something that, you know, if we get to speak to Hatun at some point, maybe I can pass on a few words. Yeah, I've looked at a lot of videos and I looked at a little bit of this, right? You just have to ask, you know, what is it? Have I committed an offense? Am I acting unlawfully? Are you giving me a lawful order? If so, what is that order? And I'll comply if I'm...
Based on
if
what? Yeah.
Exactly. So you've got to put the thing here. But in this case, of course, like you say, in the mind of probably in this officer's mind, I don't have anything that I can hold you with or legally get you to move, but I'm going to tell you that I'm doing it, and I'm, you know, going to, because most members of the public will just, you know, acquiesce because it's an authority figure, and if she didn't want to leave, then, you know, they can't make her leave. But hey, I'm going to make you leave anyway, and then just, you know, I'll rather have those consequences, as you point out, that potentially have some sort of violence that I have to then explain to my superiors.
And I wonder how clear Hatun is what the situation is 3 meters away from her. Because I'm not really sure that she's aware of that.
Yeah, you're coming out. We'll all go together. Hatun, we'll go together. We'll go together. Madam, you've got to come out now.
Don't pull me, don't pull me.
Well, you come with us. Walk with me. We'll go together.
Don't pull me. Okay,
We're not.
don't
Your
pull me.
presence is going into trouble.
Your presence. No, so now they are saying it's your presence that is doing this. And this is wrong. This is wrong. You cannot say that. You're not allowed to say that. That is... No.
Yeah, so now it's gone from we'd like to move you to we are moving you, whether it's lawful or not. We're doing it, and quite like you say, your presence is doing this, as if she's reaching out to these people and like tickling their balls or punching them in the face or something like that. And of course, she actually hasn't done any of them. Most of them haven't even seen anything she's heard. It's just like, hey guys, come over here. Here's this agitator who's put holes in the Quran or whatever the case is. So if you had to ask most of this baying mob what it is that they were there for, they'd have no clue. They probably repeat something like hate preach or whatever the case is. But if you ask them what it is, they wouldn't have anything substantial to say. But then again, that's not the purpose, right? A lot of them are, you know, not particularly well versed in thinking clearly or critically in any case.
I want
Let's go now.
So Dave is pointing this out. I'm not sure what this else. Before you come to that, stops. So Dave, maybe you can clarify, because I can't see it. I'm on a mobile phone at the moment, but I've put it on screen there. So this is legislation, regulation, section 14. So maybe you can expound on what that is. Please point that out.
When the public speaking area in Hyde Park, I was just going to do that. When the public speaking area in Hyde Park to comply with the direction given by a constable to move from some place in that area or leave the area.
Okay,
So
but does the direction
If-
have to be lawful? Or can it be any direction? If he says to you,
Any
stand on your
direction.
head, is that a lawful direction? Because that's
It doesn't
vague,
say
that's
lawful.
vague terminology. No, it doesn't, right?
Rob, it doesn't say lawful. It gives
exactly.
you the discretion of the person on site.
Okay, well, in that case, in this case, then you've got to push them to arrest you, and under what charge? Otherwise, battery and assault, right?
I don't think they will. I think this is sufficient. I think Dave is right, because if and they're giving a lot of power here to the policeman, telling him you are in charge, you are the one
you
who
can
decides.
essentially you can do what you like. It's your subjective opinion in the moment. No, I don't
Correct.
accept that. Yeah, I don't
I
accept
know,
that.
but that's the way it's worded.
And the only way to overcome this is to challenge this in court, right? And that's a long process. But it's, depending on how far you want to go, then that can be a worthwhile process, because unless you get a legal precedent for that, they will be allowed to continue making their own decisions here that
Well,
aren't based
maybe
in law.
this is the precedent that you're waiting for.
Yeah, it's too vacuous. I think it's going to be challenged in the court.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's fine. I think that this could be challenged in the Supreme Court, but that would be a tremendous ask of somebody to go through all of that. Although, what's more important than challenging your freedoms and for police officers to abide by very strict and clear guidelines? What direction?
Yeah, but
Does
can
it say
you
go
cater
over there,
for
pick
every
your nose?
situation?
Is that a direction that somebody would follow? What it's not even reasonable. What constitutes reasonable, right? Again, this is just vacuous, and this is often the case with these sort of things, and it's intentionally, as you say, left like that, such that people can, do whatever they want to do. Which I don't think we want a police state where the police decide in the moment without a valid or legal justification.
What I find, I don't know what to call this. I would feel ashamed if I would be a Muslim and the people around me are seeing somebody who's being taken away due to my aggressive behavior, and then the people around me cheer as though they have achieved a victory. And this I would be ashamed. I would feel like really terrible that this is what is happening, because for me this is absolutely inexplicable how anybody can go and feel pride when somebody else is being escorted out due to my unruly behavior. This is too much for me.
Yeah, but that's the psychology, right? It's a victory in the sense of like because that's the mentality, right? And it comes from the books and from the teachings and from the example, right? To override other people. We are better than them, and whatever means necessary to achieve that goal. And so they think they've won a point here. Of course, if reasonable people look at this, they're acting like a mob of animals, and that's probably
It's
insulting
hooligans.
animals. And it reflects incredibly badly. But of course, that level of thinking for the Muslim mind, or at least some of these Muslims,
Wow.
is just it's just something that they couldn't comprehend.
But this is sad, eh?
Stop it!
Trying to help.
Stop it! Just stop it! Sister, move from that group. So, my Christian sisters and brothers in the crowd, I don't feel safe for that. Do you understand that?
Okay, so they're starting to push her out, and she is resisting, saying, no, I do not want to go and leave my Christian brothers and sisters here. I do not feel safe for them. So this is amazing, that she, in this situation where everybody just wants to get at her throat, she is saying, no, don't worry about me. You can take me out, but you can't leave Christian brothers and sisters here. So either we go together, and this is, I think, maybe the best move that they should have done, that the people who are protecting her just form like a ring around her as an additional buffer, and either escort her into a safe area, or if push comes to shove, then really take her out, but then as one group and not individual people, and leave them there, because if one of them is now left there, there's a high level of aggression factor here now at the moment. So this is a tough situation.
My Christians are over there.
The focus is on you right now. So we need.
And yes, he's right, but they're both right. Okay, the focus is on you, absolutely. But the thing is, she's not there alone. If the focus is on her and they take her out, then the focus is no longer on her. Then it turns to the next available person, and this is the other people around her.
But the other question is, whose focus? The police's or the mob?
The mob. The mob.
Okay, well but the question to ask is, who should the police be focusing on at the moment in terms of what to do here? And if the view is that they should focus on her to get rid of her, to de-escalate the situation, well then of course they've done exactly what the mob wanted, and this sets a precedent that the next time somebody does something that Muslims or any other group feels or chooses to feel offended by, they can come down and the same thing will happen.
Yes.
And that's exactly the opposite of what we want. So, yes,
It's
you
a
do
dangerous
what's easy,
precedent,
but you're not
yeah.
doing what's right. But again,
Yes.
to ask police to do this, look, that's just, then the police are not there because they have a great deal of, thoughtful things the thinking processes around this. They do what they're told. And oftentimes you can get police to do all kinds of things if you can justify, because it takes a certain type of person. When I was young, I was in the police, right? I still had some level of moral, culpability and thought. But if I were there, I probably would have followed along. Like, let's get her out of there. But now I look at it a bit more mature, a bit more thinking and going, okay, is this the right way to go? And I'm convinced it's not.
Get you, it is.
Son,
All
I
the
want
cameras
my-
are on us.
I want my
Let's go.
children.
Let's go. Come on. If you resist, you'll be arrested.
Did you
If
hear
you
that?
resist, you will be arrested.
Oh, is that what it said? Because I wasn't sure if they were speaking to her or to one of her colleagues at that stage. So what did you hear there?
I heard that if you resist, you will be arrested.
Okay, that's what she should have done there. I made a ask her and see. It's easy for me to sit here and say that, but it sounds like that she was prepared for that anyway. So, well, then you have to arrest me. And what is the charge? What is it? What unlawful act do you suspect me of committing? And once you do that, here's my hands. Please handcuff me. But this is kind of bully tactics to get her to move now when she obviously clearly doesn't want to leave.
Son, you're hurting my arm. Son,
That's the first. There's number two. She said it twice now. She'll probably say it again. Right, so they've now got her very firmly, and they're removing her whether she wants to or not. To me, unless somebody can say differently, that these police are acting unlawfully now. She hasn't committed an unlawful act. She's not suspected of doing so, and this is battery and assault.
Son, you're hurting my arm.
Right,
You're hurting my arm.
Walk with me.
I need my brothers and sisters to leave that crowd. Sir, Mike's over there.
Walk with me, comply with my commands, even though I haven't a lawful justification for them.
Sir, I don't want to say call my Christian brothers and sisters who are in the crowd.
Okay, the quality of the other video was a lot better here.
You're hurting my arm. Okay, but that doesn't mean you can hurt my arm. That
Stop it there.
doesn't mean you can hurt my arm.
Can you hear me? Hello?
You can.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. So at this point, there's force being used here, and she's being essentially violently ejected from the park here, with no legal justification. And they'll come with this whole thing of disturbing the peace or all this sort of bollocks or whatever the case is. This was, in my mind, an unlawful act. And they've done this before to other people. So whether it's Muslim, this isn't just because it's Hatun, by the way. It would be the same for somebody else. So
This is exactly the point. I'm arresting you for upsetting Muslims. Yes.
Hurt my arm. And if something happens to my Christian brothers and sisters, someone needs to take responsibility.
Listen to the Muslims.
yeah, this
This
is
is
like
crazy.
playing animals.
Go away. In the car, get away now. Get in now. In and away.
The same JC's video was so dark here.
JC, can you hear me?
Well, I saw one which was quite light for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, if you can find it. But I think the more important thing is to hear what she was saying, because the other video.
Yeah, this was very close. Yeah, much better than the others.
So he was a lot closer there.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's pretty much, and then she gets
Wow.
put in the car and driven off, right? And I think if we go to the other video, if you've got the other one up, and then you'll hear at least part of it towards the end as well. So what happened after this? There's a couple of other videos, as we mentioned. If you haven't heard it before, I'll just repeat it. So what happened after this was that the police, people were walking around. There was somebody walking around live streaming, and they cleared the park. And the reason for clearing the park was because it was a breach of COVID regulations with more than 30 people. By the way, this has happened for the entire day, but the police conveniently decided at about whatever time it was, 9 o'clock or whatever it may have been, 10 o'clock or earlier even, they would now suddenly invoke a breach of COVID regulations to clear the park. All that happened is that people walked away from in between these two fences to further up the road, for want of a better word. Yeah, no problem. So people walked up the road and congregated there. So as soon as Stops comes back, we will go into another video. So there was another video that was recorded with a guy called Zachariah. So he's a Muslim convert. He was a Muslim, then he became a Seventh-day Adventist. He used to come down to the speaker's corner with a Bible and a tie, and he was far more quiet. And then he converted or reverted back to being a Muslim and become like a bit of a lunatic, shouting, screaming. I think he needs psychological help. But the more interesting part is towards the end when there's a guy there that sort of questions a few of the Muslims around there about whether they think this is okay. And so that's the part we want to try and find now is that video, so the Zachariah video, but not him, right? He's just shouting and ranting like a bit of a lunatic. So he's got nothing much to say. But it's more towards the end of the video where, as I say, this other guy speaks to a few Muslims, and they're trying to justify this. And we'll just listen to see if they say anything remotely substantial. I mean, it's barely coherent, never mind substantial.
We tell the truth as it is. Yes. So therefore, when you see that,
should I jump forward?
Yeah, if you go towards nearer the end, so if you scroll a lot further forward to keep going, a little bit further on from there.
Rachel, agent of the prophets.
So you want him to be speaking. Okay, so there we go. This time left there. Just stop it there for a moment. Just stop it there, stops. Okay, so this guy with the chic sort of look is the Zachariah guy. I was just saying he's the Seventh-day Adventist. So a form of Christian, or a form of Christianity. Before that, he was a Muslim. So he's
hang on. The guy with the Palestinian headgear, or the funny looking guy.
He's a guy called Zachariah. He, like I say, he used to be a form of a Christian, and he was a Muslim before that. So he's reverted or converted twice, if you like. So first from Islam to Christianity, or a version of Christianity, and back to Islam. And
but not the guy with the aerodynamic beard.
No. He's a Muslim, I think, but the whole video was around the Zachariah guy who was ranting and raving about how bad Hatun was, etc. Now the guy on the very left-hand side is the guy that's questioning them and going, okay, what's going on here? What's your justification? He's not using those words, but he's questioning the Muslims about why Hatun was removed.
Amongst the slightest, but we must love Prophet Muhammad to the extent that as ever, subhanAllah. I love my Prophet Muhammad more than my mother.
What's that got to do with the book? I mean, you're talking about a prophet, but what you're doing is damaging like one book.
It's our faith that it's our faith that it is our faith. No, it's our faith. It's the revelation, the wahi.
Stop there. Okay, so it's just a thing with the Zachariah as well. Like I say, I think there's definitely psychological issues because again, when he speaks, and you don't see it as much here, but you'll see it earlier on, right? His eyes are like closed, like he's in a trance, right? When he's doing
he's like blind. Yeah.
So the brain has obviously been somehow seriously psychologically affected. But more to the point that's happening now, the guy with the glasses on, they said, "This is in my heart." Like this book, okay. But then the question is, if this book is if the message is in your heart, why on earth do you care about the book? If you've been given this message somehow, because obviously it hasn't come directly from God, so it has to come from a book that you battle to justify. But if that is the case, then why have you got any problem with the book? The book is simply a copy, and some people say a bad copy of an original message, where that's supposedly being maintained, and everybody's got it in their heart. So what's the problem?
But it
doesn't ask those questions, but
years ago, and it's in the heart and the chest of every believer that will follow Allah and His beloved Prophet Muhammad. No Muslim will go out and burn Bible, rip the Bible, shred the Bible, throw it down the toilet or whatever. There are many people who have burned the Quran, who have put bacon in the Quran, who have kicked the Quran, who have done many things.
Okay, stop that part again there. This whole version, there's one Quran. It's not the Quran. There's copies of it, and you've got it in your heart anyway. So what the hell's the problem? It's almost as if this book it's one book, but it's many books. It's almost like their critique of the Trinity. What's this one Quran? The Quran.
But I like it's like a child. Somebody put bacon in the Quran. Oh my God, they put bacon in the Quran.
What he really means is that he heard a report that this happened somewhere. He hasn't seen it himself, but somehow he's chosen to be affected by something that happened hundreds of miles or in a different country or wherever it might have happened. And somehow that's emotion affected him. I mean, the control. I mean, if you just thought about it, right? If you were an alien that came down to this planet, all you have to do is propagate Islam, and you would have total control, right? You could control all of these humans without them even knowing. It would be like an invisible control mechanism over all of them. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, but how far can you take this? Can I now take a photo of bacon and put the photo in the Quran, and this is then going to demon? Come on. How far can you go?
Yeah, anything they subjectively think is offensive, they can't justify. But we're not asking.
Exactly.
These people are not being rational, right? This is an emotional response. There's no rational response here. This is entirely emotional, psychological, and oftentimes those are completely irrational.
So if I take my Quran and I buy some bacon in the supermarket and I put the plastic package into the Quran, what happens? What have I done?
Somebody has chosen to defend its stops, and if you ask them why, you get some sort of vacuous response.
No, and so I say to you, I say to you, if you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, okay, not a Christian or non-Christian, then you should condemn this action. Just as I will condemn those who try to.
Why?
Exactly.
Why are you like, from what I said last week, it's like people surrounding her, like shouting at her.
She's been doing this for years. She harasses Muslims, goes into their face.
Stop. Harassing Muslims. Okay, so again, these are just words that they have no clue what it means. In order for her to harass, she would have to go to particular Muslims all the time, and they would not be able to leave. That would be, I mean, again, Dave will bring up the definition of harassment. She's going there asking questions. She's doing it loudly. She's obviously walking up to different people. That's what Speaker's Corner is. You don't go to Speaker's Corner and then claim that you're being harassed unless you very clearly say, I think you could have a case if somebody was following you, said, hey, I don't want you to follow me around. You are harassing me now. Leave me alone. And you were very clear about that. I suppose then you could go to the police. Right? But I've never seen her do that specifically. But even if she did, even if she walked around, somebody can walk away. And as soon as they move away, further enough away from Speaker's Corner, she's not going to follow them anyway. So you always have a choice to walk away. If you go into Speaker's Corner, it's not the same as walking down the pavement.
Someone's harassing you. You guys are surrounding her. Okay, 1 minute. Have you ever... No one's ever touched her. She's not Christian.
She's a devil. She's a devil.
7-day Adventist. She's a devil. The brother, 7-day Adventist said...
Have you ever seen a Muslim insult Jesus?
Right.
Okay, there's the asymmetry.
Right?
Have you ever heard a Muslim insult Jesus? This is the asymmetry. They can't insult Jesus because they believe he's a prophet. The Christians don't believe Muhammad is a prophet. They just think he's a lunatic, and we agree with him, right? So there's an asymmetry. So asking, do you see the Muslims insulting Jesus? Well, obviously not, because you think he's a prophet. The difference is the Christians don't think that that Muhammad is a prophet. So what's your point?
No, bro, you've just... Even if they did, I wouldn't take it seriously. I'd just say that. Because you don't love your prophet. You don't love your prophet. All right, let's
That's a typical Muslim response as well, right? Wave your finger around and suggest that somebody else doesn't understand. You haven't even you barely made a coherent, let alone a substantial argument. In your own head is justified, but you can't possibly relate that to somebody else in any meaningful or substantial way. And so then it's the hand waving and you just don't understand. Well, of course you don't, because you haven't said anything that's understandable. So just this is on the edge of Speaker's Corner. So that's the main road. Behind them there, where those lights are, that's one way into Hyde Park, and it would take you there, and again to the right. So the man with the cap on the very far end, that if you walked in there, that would take you into where the normal congregation of Speaker's Corner is. So they're now standing on a sort of big open pavement, which we could show on Google Maps if people wanted a reference point for it, for those who have never been there. And literally across the road where they're looking, where Zachariah's looking, is kind of a big arch that's made of marble, hence Marble Arch, and there's an underground tube station about literally 100 yards or 200 yards from where they are now.
See my videos on YouTube. I am condemned Daesh, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra, Al-Taliban, all those people, they are not Muslim. I condemn them. I condemn them. Me, I condemn them. I said on this one, I don't play no games.
Why don't you go after the people who don't condemn? Wait, hold on. How do you
That's a very good question. He says, I condemn X, Y, and Z. He says, so why don't you educate the people who don't condemn them? Because there are people who don't condemn all these groups, who are part of these groups. So how come that you are just complacent enough to say, well, I condemn all the people who are violent. Why don't you then condemn the people who don't condemn them? That's a very good point, actually. No, you haven't done your job. Your job is not to be complacent and say, well, I condemn them. No, your job is to look after the others as well. Your job, and that is very clear in the Quran, is to go and educate people on the straight and narrow path to salvation. That's your job.
How did you jump on defending the Prophet to ISIS?
I'm simply
Because you're putting all this
when I see somebody who won't condemn ISIS, I acknowledge them as crazy individuals.
But where are you
I
going?
don't go around and all I see is
How are you going to ISIS when we're talking about our love for the Prophet?
it's like
When you can't answer,
why do you see these
they bring up.
Yeah, this is quite funny.
irony.
We love the Prophet. We love the Prophet. This is the best person on earth. Well, yeah, but hang on. What about the story with Aisha? Do you still love the Prophet? Well, we can't talk about that. We love the Prophet, but we're not going to talk about that. This is only you hate preachers who are talking about Aisha. We don't talk about Aisha. No, you oaf. This is exactly the point. This is the red line for you that Yasser Qadi mentioned. You go that far, but then you don't go any further. So you will go and look at what Muhammad said, and if it's something good, you will say it. If it's something bad, you will not just ignore it. You will pretend like it never happened. This is the way that your mentality works. This is how you were brought up. This is what you were taught and how to propagate Islam. That's the way it works. So, yeah.
ISIS is their trap card, isn't it? No.
like all I see last week.
So why don't you go up to her and say, yo, man, you should have gone.
Exactly.
Why did you do that? You should have gone to her.
I have. I told her why you go around.
Excuse me. Any person who has any intellect or akhl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives all reasoning and intellect. Allah didn't make us stupid. Allah gives us reason. You should go and say, listen, what are you doing? If you're not a Muslim or non-Muslim, that what you're doing is wrong. It's wrong.
Why?
It's wrong.
Bro,
Because you feel it. Why is
but
it
the
wrong?
thing is-
Because you choose to feel it.
Yeah, but he's making his God look like a stupid fool because he forgets that his God created this person to do exactly that.
Oh, don't
So-
go down there. That rabbit hole stops. I mean, they can't get out of that one. But they have free will. Apparently, that paradox just rears its ugly head. And then it just becomes, it goes from crazy to absurd.
The cycle behind all this is this.
But this is now really getting ridiculous.
They cannot stand the fact that Islam is the fastest growing religion on earth.
Oh dear. These guys just parrot it, right? I bet you he's never researched it. He has no clue. He's heard somebody say this and he went, that sounds good to me. I like that idea. I'll parrot that back. That's what most humans do. They don't research it. You know, I've looked into numbers and stuff like that.
How many?
It's just-
How many a day? How many last week? How many last month? We do this for COVID, so we know exactly how many people have COVID for what reason and blah blah blah. Okay, how many Muslims joined? What is a Muslim? Can you tell me? Ahmadiyas? Well, they're not Muslims. Well, what about the Baha'i? Well, they're not really Muslims. And what about the Shias? Oh, no, don't talk about those. Well, what about the jihadis? No, they're not part of Muslims. They're just condemned. Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda, Taliban, everybody is condemned. So hang on, how many? There's only 3 Muslims left now. What are you going to do now?
And we won't take into account the massive number of Muslims that are deconverting and the Pew polls that show, you know, the numbers of Muslims that are, you know, the positive, there is a positive increase, at least there seems to be, at least, or that's the projection. But again, that's under question, right? So we've got a lot of information from different countries like Bangladesh and elsewhere, and you've done a lot of it that show the deconversion rate over the years, right? People who are now saying, no, I'm a non-believer, I'm an atheist or whatever.
Exactly, that's the one thing. The other thing is this projection that was done, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago, is already superseded by the new numbers. It's already gone. It's out the window because the projection, for example, in a country like Iran, they are really worried because they're doing a factor of 1.7, which is even worse than the European countries because people are not having children because they're so worried about the future. So this growth rate that you used to have, you know, this exponential growth rate for even for Niger, this has gone down. It's no longer true. The projection that was done is already out the window, so forget about it.
Number one. Number two, you said something.
And the other thing is, it doesn't matter how many people you are. It doesn't matter that more people believe that it's wrong. It doesn't make it right. If something is wrong, it is wrong, not because the people are making it. So,
it doesn't make it true, right? So the fact that even if we were to grant the entirely contentious claim that it's the fastest growing religion, what does that tell you? It just means that more people are either being born into it or are being, not thinking critically. It doesn't mean that it's true. The appeal to the ad populum fallacy, just because people believe it, therefore it's true, is obviously a fallacious reasoning. Again, people like this in the street, again, you can't blame them too much, probably. They don't think about it.
If you go tomorrow, if you tomorrow you buy a new BMW from here, and then you put it outside your door, and then I come because I don't like it, I take it and paint and then threw it all over your car, because I don't like you. So you're gonna come and tell me, what is this book have to do with it?
£1,000 worth of.
Did he stop it there? Stop it there. Did he say, I'll come and do something to your car? I just want to make sure I heard that. His analogy is, you buy a new car and he comes and does something to the car. That's his analogy, yes?
Yes. Then he's allowed to do something.
And that's the other problem, right? I think we've got to highlight it again if we haven't done it a million times, right? As soon as a Muslim brings up an analogy, it's 99 times out of 100, it's going to fail. It's going to be disanalogous. Don't bring up an analogy. Firstly, it's her book. So it's like saying, if this were supposedly analogous, let's say this guy, that's looking now, if you were going to use this correctly, you'd say, okay, I bought a new car and I've drilled some holes in my car. Well, I can't be upset with me drilling the hole. And if you came past, would you be justified in being upset with me buying a car and drilling holes in my own car if you love BMW? That would be absurd, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
That would be a correct analogy, because this guy's got the analogy so completely disanalogous, which is par for the course, right?
Right to a book that you can get for free. That's
But hold on a second.
Especially the fact that it's her Quran.
But look, let me tell you something.
It wasn't like it's your
There we go.
Quran. I have a Quran at home. I can do with that what I want to.
I know.
If some dude burns a Bible or burns an image of someone I hold dear, to me that person's crazy.
Right, okay. But however, look, we don't see so much about is your Quran at home that you do. But you're doing it publicly for everybody to see. But the point that we're seeing behind it is you're trying to personally attack me. You're trying to insult me personally.
That's nonsense. Stop it there. I mean, again, this is the level of psychological development or lack thereof. You're trying to attack me. No, my friend, you're so profoundly confused. But he's not alone. There's a lot of people that think this, right? This is just completely an illusion. I won't say delusion until I've explained it to people. Once I've explained it to people, I think it's knocked down, it's irrefutable. Once I've explained it to people, and it can be falsified, by the way, as well. Once I've explained it, now if you continue to believe it, you're deluded. At this stage, he's just under a mass delusion like many other people that you're doing something to him. No, he's choosing to feel a certain way. He just doesn't even realize it necessarily. So what I mean by choose is that there are other options. He's selecting a particular option that he got programmed, or he's watched or learned from other people because he wasn't born that way, and that's what he's acting out, and it can be changed. And it just takes a little bit of psychological development for that to happen.
Whether I see it as your Quran or my Quran, you know what we see? We see that you are trying to burn or destroy the message. Yes, it is a book. Yes, but it's not only a book. But
stop. Didn't the other guy say that the message is in the heart? So how can you burn or destroy the message? So one Muslim is contradicting the other one. Maybe they should get together and have a chat about if this message can be destroyed. If it's in your heart, it can't be. Therefore, burning the Quran couldn't do that. But again, every Muslim's got his own idea here about what's going on. And I think
maybe it's about timing. Maybe it's at this time the one is convenient, the other one is convenient at another time.
Yeah, I mean they just contradict each other. But this is not rational arguments, right? This is emotional. This is emotional stuff that's being said now. Because if you had to play this back and this guy was a bit more attentive and wasn't emotional, he'd probably realize if he didn't have too much ego that he's just all complete nonsense and he's contradicted his buddy. So you have to ask him, is the message in your heart or not? If he says the message is not in your heart and it's only in the book, well, then you speak to your buddy, and that would be problematic.
And he's wearing a mask, but he's moving closer and closer and closer. Look where the other guys by now have been. He's just squeezing in there.
Your partner,
Yeah.
no,
But watch his hands as well, right? So he's very like agitated and emotional, right? The hands are right there by the guy's face, etc.
Yeah.
You know, you want the guy should be stepping back at the moment.
I don't put reasons to crazy practices. I admit that.
Come on, man. Come on, man. You're being silly now. You're being silly now.
She's a little Christian woman. Leave her alone.
No, touch her. Let me tell you. Yeah, exactly. You know, because they know that what she's doing, she's been provocative.
Oh dear.
Oh, yes, you
Provocative.
can't do that.
Welcome
You
to
can't
the
come to
21st
Speaker's
century
Corner and be
in the United
provocative.
Kingdom. Yeah, welcome to the 21st century in the United Kingdom and most other countries. Provocative isn't a crime. You, my dear Muslims, need to get used to something that you claim is provocative. Get used to it. Upgrade your psychology and your emotionality. Get used to it. We're not going to change for you as much as you're going to cry and complain about it. Sorry, or at least some of us aren't anyway.
So now somebody else comes with a new opinion.
Doesn't have no knowledge about another religion. What's best to do for you to learn?
Oh no, I'm not talking about the religion. I'm talking about a book that a crazy individual is just
Oh, this is the guy that's watching. This guy's going to be
next
touching
guy.
him all the time. Yeah. This guy that's just out of shot now. It's like a domineering tactic.
Yes, don't touch me, baby. Please, stay away.
It's going to
He has no
continue.
knowledge of it. The best thing to do is what? Get the knowledge of that religion and then challenge the people. Then you have something against them.
Why is it Muslims are coming
That's exactly what she's doing. She's challenging people.
Islam, bro. You lot are coming into preach and you don't see anybody who's there to
There's some ninja fellow here.
the majority of people that come here, they don't come to preach their religion, they come to read about Islam. What is the mental? What's that about?
I wonder what he would do if I say, listen, stop touching me, I'm not gay. Do you think this would be a reaction?
Who knows? I mean,
Oh.
here we go. So he's following hijab, of course, because hijab loves doing that as well.
Yeah.
So there we go, folks. Again, some more, you could say, excitement, unfortunate circumstances in Speaker's Corner. And again, it seems to be the same old story. It's only one group of people that are behaving badly, or at least a certain subset of a group of people. Let me correct myself, because not all of them are like that. In fact, I've spoken to Muslims, and so has Stops, who say it doesn't affect me. And they are the models that the rest of this lot need to emulate, at least if they're going to be in this country. One way or another, they're going to get the message. So I don't know if there's any other comments there, but I think that's sort of our take on this. My closing message is that freedom of speech and freedom of expression in Speaker's Corner is something that needs to be preserved at all costs. And even if it takes 100 policemen and they have to have some way to prevent any weapons being brought in there, and if they have to police it for 8 hours, once, half a day, once a week, to uphold the freedoms that people have died for hundreds of years here, what could be more important than that? I know what is more important at the moment is going after people that, quote unquote, hurt people's feelings. And this is nonsense. And of course, it will lead to absurdity. And those very policemen and the people that call for that, the same thing will happen to them. And this, of course, they don't realize. It's okay when you're on the crest of the wave. As soon as the wave crashes and you're at the bottom, you'll be swept away like everybody else that you were laughing at when it happened to them.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to learn from this. They have to. They must realize that the level of violence is increasing. They have to realize that they cannot impede free speech like that. They cannot. I mean, here I can understand it was, they were confronted with a situation that they weren't clearly not trained for. So yeah, I can sort of understand it, and I will, I will give them, a D or something for incompetence. But the thing is that they need to learn that in future, they need to look after the people. They need to protect free speech. It is more important to protect free speech than an individual or something, or the hurt feelings of a group. And this is what they need to cater for. They need to do this. They have to come there. And if it takes more numbers on a Sunday to go there and keep the people separated, they need to come up with an idea. But just to go and take out the person who says something controversial to Muslims, and Muslims are the ones who react with violence, That is not acceptable. You can't have mob rule and just, give in and say, well, there you have it, let's remove free speech. I don't think you can do that.
Yeah, we're in agreement. There's the link to the Discord server, by the way. We might pop over there for a short while. So if you're listening and you didn't
I want to
come on
finish
here
my
and speak
video
us,
on Imran first before I do that.
that's fine.
Because I don't want to
and again,
I don't want to see happening what happened the 2 weeks ago, that I was doing all sorts of things and looking after other things, and then I didn't finish the video. It took me like bloody 3 weeks to do this thing.
Okay, I'll pop onto Discord quickly. So there's the link. I've put the link into the chat as well. That's the same Discord server we use after Gin and Tonic on a Friday night. So if you want to join us there, TDS Dave is one of our moderators. He's there more than we are. So I'm sure he'll have a conversation as
And
well.
if you
I'll
don't
pop
know
in there for a short
Discord,
while.
you can use it as a browser mode, or you can download the app, which is a lot quicker. And then you just click on the logo that you see, which I have removed. I'm sorry, I will put it back now. This logo. So the logo with the gin and the tonic bottle next to it. You click on this logo and you go to the is it the speech link, after show speech or something, audio. I can't remember the name of this thing, because it had me baffled in the beginning. What the hell do? I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. Nothing's going on. So you just need to click on the right sort of channel link in the second to the left corner to get you to a place where you can hear somebody.
Yeah, Tatiana, thank you for the comment. I'm not sure whether you would also appreciate it if we started. We're both atheists, so if we started to critique Christianity, but in this particular case, we're critiquing free speech and a subset of certain people who I don't seem to understand or like free speech. So that's the main thing. But
that's where you go.
There we go. After show voice. So on that note, I want to thank Stops as always for joining me. It's always better
it's been
we
fun,
can have a conversation together. Thank you for those who are listening, and we'll do it again ad hoc. We do it when we've got time and we're both of us are in the mood, and there's a topic of interest that we want to discuss.
Challenge us.
If you want to hear more, then every Friday, 8 p.m. UK time, the Gin and Tonic Show, Gin and Tonic. Stops put up the thing, you just type it in, JINN and Tonic Show, and you'll find us there every single Friday. This is more ad hoc on this channel. And on that note, I'm sure we'll be back again with something interesting in the future. Thank you very much and good night.